Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your Critique of the Week. It's Friday, May 8th. So glad you could join me. A little bit sleepy. I went to LA yesterday for a meeting with Alan, Rattle's founder, and got in at 6 a.m. this morning. So I'm a little bit tired, but let's see what we can do. We always have fun doing the Critique of the Week, taking a little break from the regular workday, looking at your poems, which are always exciting. If you have poems in the queue, please let me know. That's what we do. If you go to rattle.com under content, you'll find Critique of the Week. There's a submission portal there. Submit 2 poems for consideration, and it really helps if you're here for an episode and say in the chat window on YouTube that you are here. That's mainly how I do it right now. So we did have somebody ask earlier today, what happens? I have to work every Friday afternoon. I'll try to accommodate other people too, but for now, that's what we're doing. We have so many submissions here. We might as well get to the people who are actually here first. Let's see. Elizabeth Vine says, I've got some poems here. Deb T has got some in the queue. Okay. Brian O'Sullivan, but he's also happy to wait for a future episode, Brian says. Brian was a member on the Poetry Space Squad, of course. That's Katie's audio-only podcast. She does. It's a roundtable talking about poetry. And we had a wonderful episode this week, which Brian participated in. Also, we had Chelsea McClellan and Christiana Doucette, so some really familiar faces to all you rattlers out there. It was an episode with Susan Spear on her book that she co-wrote on form. So we talked all about meter for 2.5 hours on, I guess that was Wednesday, right? And then I caught a flight the next morning, flew to LA, flew back. Yeah, it's hard to keep track when things are like that. Also, I don't know about you, but having the Rattlecast on a Sunday really threw me off this week. So I felt like it was Friday all day yesterday, and it was very confusing. But anyway, we're going to have some fun looking at poems. And let's see. So we had Deb Tannenbaum, Elizabeth Vine, Jaymee Thomas is down there. Okay. Kimberly Gibson Trans here. Let me see. Let me write some of these names down. Elizabeth Vine was one of them. Elizabeth Vine. Deb Tannenbaum. Okay. And, Jaymee Thomas. Jaymee Thomas. Okay. And I'll put on Brian O'Sullivan, too. We'll see what we get to. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so we got some names up there. Let's start. Let's try to find Elizabeth Vine. Elizabeth. Okay. So as always, the goal of this critique is to give that workshop experience. It's so valuable talking and letting people know how your poems are landing on them. We're a great crowd always. And a reminder too, click the like button. We've got almost 50 people watching right now. And all people who love poetry, readers of poetry. This is your audience. Me as an editor, other people are editors too out there in the audience right now. And then the readers of poetry and the people who love poetry. These are the people that you are trying to connect with, And so knowing how your poems land with them is very valuable. So talking about what works and what doesn't is the number one thing we can do. Give suggestions, any ideas you have. Anything you want to leave in the chat window is helpful to the poets participating. We all just want everybody to get better at poetry because we all love poetry. And so the more good poetry we have, the happier we all are. And let me see if there are any general questions from Elizabeth. She says, I would love to know if the reader has enough context in both of these poems. That's just what we're talking about. Also curious about flow pacing, if the poems drop off at any point or become confusing and boring. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Now let's see. And this is Elizabeth Vines from Nevada City, California. That's a place I've been. It's fun. There's an escape room. We had a lot of fun in there, and other stuff too. All right. Well, anyway, let's take a look at this poem. Zoom in a little bit so we can see it. Hang on. That's better. Okay, here. Let's take a look at this. The first one is Sweeping Water. Bangkok, October 2010. Her ripples melt into mine as I pass, the woman brushing water from her shop floor. There isn't a door, just an opening where a wall would go if we weren't here. Which means I'm in her water, opaque green swallowing everything beneath my knees next to Besa and blue wings kissed by a sucking loach. Down the alley to architecture and thermostat, an LG gasket nuzzles the edges of a bloated pig. He's riding the river on his back. Bowls of fish ball soup are here, somehow threatening to overflow. I've had dreams like this, our skins touching like they do on bus rides through the city, snapping together, lingering with a pull of sweat, then apologizing to our feet for swaying. The curling flesh of a viper makes such a quick appearance, no one can be sure of what they saw. I roll pieces of chili between my fingers, releasing their vapors, and forget not to rub my eye. The steam of floating peanuts takes me away from my tears to my favorite peanut man. He uses his peanut scoop to rescue someone's fleeing mangosteens. They're circling the women selling collections of wood-shaped penis. I can't understand how people's brooms move the river or where it will go that isn't here, but everyone I see sweeping water smiles when I wave. The laughter hiccups are contagious. Catching one, I'm not sure I fully grasp how it came to me, but I've been kissed by too many fish to ever be the same. Apple shares the sun with me on our roof in the afternoon, our legs washed, waters receded. She tells me in our lifetime her city will be buried beneath its water. Yeah. So, as Jaymee Thomas says, there's some great descriptions here. Yeah. Tom Barlow points out riding the river on his back. Kimberly Gibson translates, love fleeing mangosteens, too, my favorite fruit. Yeah. Well, it's interesting here. Yeah. Hey, JB Pen Name is here too. Says, it's been a while since I've been able to make one of these live. He has 2 in the queue too. All right. Let's see. So sweeping water. I love the idea of sweeping water. We're situated in Bangkok. I have a little bit of trouble following myself. The actual like images sort of flit by, but piecing it all together is a little difficult for me. I don't feel like we have like a sense of the scene in a sort of a sweeping panoramic way that we feel situated in. So I'd wonder like a little bit more description at some point of like overview, so we can get a real sense of where these details are within sort of the geography of this poem. Even we know it's Bangkok, but it would help to get a better eye on the scene. As H. Lapino says, some great images and language, good pacing and meter, but I'm lost by the steady stream of images. Less, maybe more, in getting across a specific sense or meaning. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and it sort of floats past, not making as much of an impression, and not having as much like sticking power as it could. Dick Westheimer puts it this way, great movement in this, but it took me too long to find my footing, and the vernacular words became too much for me to be interested in digesting. Yeah. And Tom Barlow says the story is a bit vague. So how can we tighten that up? That's sort of the consensus view, and that's what I was feeling too. So we'll read it again, and we'll think about like what we should save, how we can get to sort of the action and the point a little faster too. Okay, sweeping water. Her ripples melt into mine as I pass the women brushing water from her shop floor. And so here, even in the first sentence, there's some kind of her ripples. Whose ripples? And I'm not sure because of the punctuation or lack of punctuation, and where the line break is too. Like it feels like is her ripples. It's the women's ripples. That's kind of in context what it feels like, but the sentence structure suggests that it's a different woman. So her ripples melt as I pass this other woman brushing water off from her shop floor. And that's the kind of confusion that ends up, it's sort of like ambiguities in how things are said. It's really hard to get a picture of this. Let's see. Somebody said, Jenny Milton says, is the her Bangkok? I think I need to know more if I'm going to become empathetically involved. Yeah. So that's just an example of how right away we're already just a little bit lost. Even though I like ripples melting, I like the idea of sweeping water. Those are interesting things. But I feel just a little bit lost in the poem. There isn't a door, just an opening where a wall would go if we weren't here. Where a wall would go if we weren't here. See, and that's something too. If we weren't here, where a wall would go if we weren't here. Like how does your presence affect the idea of the wall? I don't know. It's so, there's a lot of images that are interesting, but then you sort of look at them more closely and they don't really quite make sense. And I was wondering at some point about halfway through the poem too, if it was like a dream sequence and not an actual, physical real world thing. Because of things like that don't quite add up. And it's just a little hard to follow. Which means I'm in her water, opaque green, swallowing everything, my knees next to basa. I'm not sure what basa is. I guess that's one of the local words Dick was talking about. And blue wings kissed by a sucking loach. And I don't know what a loach is either. So there's a lot of learning for me looking up and Googling with this poem, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does start to feel at some, eventually with when you present new words with no context, it can be overwhelming, like Dick said. Deb T says, I also like the part about the dream on the bus, and if I read it again, I might get the connection. JB Penname says maybe the title could do more to situate us. And Winston Munn says the words lose their interest power trying to write too mysteriously, I think. Yeah. Okay, we'll keep going down a little bit. Maybe it'll make more sense moving through. What is let me look up these two words, though. Basa. That is a type of freshwater catfish. Okay, so that's a catfish. And loach is another kind of fish. That's a sort of an eel-like fish, I guess, like a long, slender fish. Okay, so two fishes there. Blue wings kissed by a sucking loach. Down the alley to architecture and thermostat. An LG casket nuzzles the edges of a bloated pig. So the LG casket nuzzling the edges of a bloated pig is another one of those nice descriptions. And I'm imagining moving through some kind of market. But architecture and thermostat doesn't really, I don't understand. Are those street names? There's just like sort of, you can't place a lot of these things, a lot of these details. And so you end up having this dreamy quality that I'm not sure that's what's intended. He's riding the river on his back. And who's the he? Which means I'm in her water. My knees, the balsa wood. So I don't understand. He's riding the river on his back. Is that the edge? Is that the pig riding the river on the back? Bowls of fish. I guess so. Nuzzles the edges of a bloated pig. He's riding. But how do we know the gender of the pig? And that's one of the things that makes it feel like it might not be the pig, but then it is, I guess. Bowls of fish ball soup are here, somehow threatened to overflow. I've had dreams like this, and this is where I wonder if the whole thing was a dream. And I think that's probably part of the point, is it felt very dreamy to have all this stuff, to be moving through this scene. But it's just hard to really get a grasp of it. And up to this point, all we're doing is getting the images and walking through the scene ourselves. So being there and feeling fully immersed in that scene is really key at this point in the poem. So we got to make that more clear by having just a better sense of where we are. Our skins touching like they do on bus rides through the city, snapping together, lingering with a pull of sweat, then apologizing to our feet for swaying. And then who is the R? So there are a lot of references, a lot of pronouns where I don't know what they're what the referent is, and that's part of the feeling of disconnect that happens in the poem too. Lingering with a pull of sweat, then apologizing to our feet for swaying, the curling flesh of a viper makes such a quick appearance. No one can be sure of what they saw. And then too, making a quick appearance of this viper is sort of a passive way to present that viper appearing. And so I can't even situate that. Like, what does it mean for a viper to make an appearance? Where is it making an appearance? Is it on Is it dead in a market stall? Is it like crawling up a wall? Is it like in a beam? Is it on the floor? Is it in a boot? I don't know where the viper is and how it makes a quick appearance and then it's not there anymore. It's just a little hard to follow. No one can be sure of what they saw. I roll pieces of chili between my fingers, releasing their vapors, and forget not to rub at my eye. So this is we get a very, I'm rolling this chili between my fingers, and then I forget not to rub my eye. It's an actual story part of the scene where something happens, which is clear and direct, and it feels nice at that point. The steam of floating peanuts takes me away from my tears to my favorite peanut man. He uses his peanut scoop to rescue someone's fleeing mangosteens. They're circling the woman selling collections of wood-shaped penis. I guess the mangosteens are. Again, it just feels like we're moving through these pronouns, and it's difficult to follow. I can understand how people's brooms move the river, or I can't understand how people's brooms move the river or where it will go that isn't there here. I like the idea of I can't understand how people's brooms move the river. And I think focusing more on that and see both this bit here, once we get sort of the eye situated, then it feels a little bit more like we're in the scene and it makes more sense. And then not being able to understand this is an interesting observation. But everyone I see sweeping water smiles when I wave. Laughter hiccups are contagious. Catching one, I'm not sure I fully grasp how it came to me, but I've been kissed by too many fish to ever be the same. And again, I'm not sure what kissed by too many fish really means. Apple shares the sun with me on our roof in the afternoon, our legs washed. And is an apple a physical apple? See, so many things. I'm sort of saying the same thing over and over again, but there's this really fragmented, disconnected, dreamlike quality to the scene. But it's so much. It's doing it so much that I just can't feel like I'm part of it. I'm not connected to it because I don't really know what we're referring to. If you look at a great thing to look at would be the last Rattlecast episode, where Jeff Stumpo presented his very strange, surreal dreams, but we always felt like we were there, and that's the difference here, where we felt like we were entering those, and here it feels a little bit too just hard to follow and disconnected to have the same experience. She tells me in our lifetime her city will be buried beneath its water. And so that's the poem. And is she Apple? So I like a lot of the details, but they're just too disconnected for me to follow. And that's just the sum of it. Let me see if anyone else is saying that I can add on. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, interesting what her city reveals at the end, that the speaker isn't really part of this world or doesn't belong to them. Yeah. Then Berman says, too many details, not out of context. H. Lapinow says, Apple is a name, I'm guessing. I think that's it, but it's hard to know, as I know someone in Thai with that name, but because it's shoved into all these other things, it becomes particularly cryptic. Yeah, very cryptic. JB Pendime says, End line is very good. Would be good to see more of who this person is that the speaker is talking to. Yeah, so if we started out the poem, if we started out, Apple shares the sun with me on our roof in the afternoon. We look down and we see this, and then we go and she takes my hand and guides me through and then describe like the pathway or something. So we get a sense of being on this journey too. That's the way to fix the poem. But as is, it just leaps between too many things and we don't get a real sense of it. Tambarla says, the images are so strong, I feel the poet has real talent to build upon. And that's definitely true. It's just the connective tissue that makes it add up to a coherent whole for us. And because I feel like disjointed and sort of detached from the poem, even though the ending, she tells me in our lifetime her city will be buried beneath its water. There's importance in that. It's an important statement, but I don't feel any sort of emotional weight attached to it because I don't have enough context. Yeah, so we need more structure, as Deb T says too. Let's take a look at the other poem, and so we'll see if it has the same problems or not. That's one of the main reasons why we do two poems. Climbing Season. And we're looking at two poems by Elizabeth Vines. Climbing Seasons. We didn't sleep in camp chairs and expensive downs or hand-me-down feathers. Didn't sleep because of the birds or the way ravens carry the night with them into the morning. Started driving under blankets of stars because it was the easier this way. Stood in line wearing sleeping bags and waited on a pink sun. We played with our cams and marveled at how their gears would save us, placed right. Without having brushed our teeth, we waited until our teeth were wearing sweaters, and we gave in, pulling the next week from our bags to find our toothbrushes back in the car. When we didn't get a spot at Camp 4, we tried sleeping on leather couches at the Awanhi until they asked us to leave and never come back. Laid our sleeping bags at the far edges of other people's campsites, strung our bodies together like beads convinced we'd hold enough, ferried our bouldering pads behind shoulders and climbed inside each other's bodies. Some of us stayed for months, or as many days as we could get away with. Some of us left early, our bodies beaconed out by ravens, circling the base of our climb. A few of us do not need to sleep again. Yeah, Tom Bartless is waiting to learn who we are. Both Kimberly Gibson Deb T and To Hope 8 says teeth wearing sweaters is great, make me laugh and cringe. Yeah. And Kimberly Gibson Tran says like the slant rhyme. I got very similar to this poem. This is less disjointed and lacking context than the other poem, but I'm still climbing season is the title, and in climbing what? And who is the we? Which I think Tom Barlow said. Brian O'Sullivan says, I feel like I'm always waiting to find out who I am, but yes, in this poem in particular. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, J.B. Penning says, again, a lot of good details, but I feel like the poem really situates itself, picks up at the part about crouches. Maybe move that part up earlier. Yeah. Yeah, and Winston Munn says, as I've said before, withholding information only causes confusion, not mystery or tension. Yeah, exactly. We want, and we talk about this all the time, but we want to be presented a story, and the tension is anticipating what happens next, which implies we already know what's happening now. And tension is also in, what does this mean? We're presented something and we make the meaning from it. That's the kind of thing that you can withhold and let us participate in. But we have to have the original sort of starting point be really clear in order for us to go along on that journey here. And so this is one of those poems where, climbing season, it would be nice if we knew more about climbing, what the climbing season was, and then who we are. Deb T says, sounds like mountain climbing. Camp 4 makes me think of that famous mountain that I can't think the name of. I assume Mount Everest because it has the camps, but, the different places to sleep. So climbing season at Everest is the title, if that's what it is. And then, our party didn't sleep in camp chairs and expensive downs, and then list some people that are there. Show us a little bit of who the we is. Didn't sleep because of the birds or the way ravens carry the night with them into the morning. See, there's a great line. Started driving under blankets of stars because it was easier this way. Stood in line wearing sleeping bags and waited on a pink sun. So these are really nice details, like really good descriptions. We played with our cams and marveled at how their gears would save us. So we played with our cams, and I thought it was cameras, but then how their gears, whose gears? It implies that like the cams gears would save the gears inside the cameras. It's a little bit. Let's see. Robert Shapiro says climbing season in the Yosemite is approximately May through October. So it could be that. Anyway, at how their gears would save us, placed right. Oh, cams are climbing. Great. Gear. Cams are climbing gear. Okay. Let's see. Cams for climbing. Oh, those are like the things you stick in the rocks, I guess. Spring-loaded camming device. Yeah, okay. So this is the thing where when you have knowledge of something that most people don't know, and maybe I'm in the minority that I didn't know what a cam was, but you have this opportunity to explain so many words and have this whole fresh lexicon of language that you can teach us while writing the poem. And so instead of saying, we played with our cams and marveled at how the gears would save us, we played with our cams, and then you can describe them. They're spring-loaded things would stick into the rocks, however the description would be. And then we get to learn in the process, and we don't feel left behind. And we also get to learn more about the topic, which hopefully the writer knows more about than us. That's one of the reasons why they're writing about it. So we get to learn too. And anyway, we waited until our teeth were wearing sweaters, and we gave in, pulled the next. I skipped a line. Without having brushed our teeth, we waited until our teeth were wearing sweaters, and we gave in, pulled the next week from our bags to find our toothbrushes back in the car. When we didn't get a spot at Camp 4, we tried to sleep on leather couches. So again, like it's referencing Camp 4, and I don't provide any context for what it means to not getting a spot. Like, did we reserve it? Was it not, we didn't get there in time? And how big is the camp? It's just hard to picture. We tried sleeping on leather couches at the Awanhi, and that's the word I want to look up too. Awani? Oh, that is Yosemite. I think probably somebody pointed out earlier, but thank you. That's the Awani Hotel at the Awani until they ask us. So let's make this climbing season at Yosemite, so we know we're situated there. Instead of just saying the Awahi, say the Awani Hotel, so we know what that is, until they ask us to leave and never come back. Laid our sleeping bags at the far edges of other people's campsites. Strung our bodies together like beads, convinced we'd hold well enough. So again, the details are really flashes of nice detail. And I think maybe too in the title, instead of just saying climbing season, I think you can get the we, like it feels to me like as I get more of a sense of what's going on, that it's sort of the locals at Yosemite who do this every year since it's a season and it's like a tradition. There's probably some word for like climbing junkies or something, like people who are just hanging around, sort of like doing a lot of climbing stuff in climbing season. So whatever you call yourselves as a we, put that in the title too. So whatever that is, climbers at Yosemite or whatever, you know what I mean? Okay. Anyway, we didn't get a spot at Camp 4. We tried sleeping on leather couches at the Awanhi until they asked us to leave and never come back. Laid our sleeping bags at the far edges of other people's campsites. Strung our bodies together like beads, convinced we'd hold well enough. Ferried our bouldering pads behind boulders and climbed inside each other's bodies. Some of us stayed for months, or as many days as we could get away with. See, this is very interesting. Like, I would love to know more about this lifestyle, that you're spending so much time climbing at Yosemite, that you're staying for months or as many days as you get away with. I'd love to get a sense of what that's like what that subculture is. And that's what the we is. But we just don't get enough of it to really understand it. Some of us left early, our bodies beaconed out by ravens, circling the base of our camp. A few of us do not need to sleep again. And then also the ravens, our bodies beaconed out by ravens. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but then circling the base of our climb. I guess I said camp before. A few of us do not need to sleep again. I don't understand why a few of us don't need to sleep again. So I feel a little lost. Yeah. Mercury says waiting in Yosemite to climb the Half Dome. Yeah. And H. Lapidus says, again, skill with images. Strung our bodies together like beads is a fantastic image in both space and time. Yeah, it is. And Tom Barlow says, I wanted a turn such as the glory when they finally climb Half Dome or El Capitan, renting a house in Fish Camp, says PMB. Now, H. Lapino says, now I'd say the location doesn't matter, but based on the audience, the choice to define it partially seems to get people thinking about the location. Is that what you want necessarily? Yeah, I mean, the thing is we want a better understanding of what's going on and the connective details we don't have to piece together. And so when I'm saying to put stuff in the title, it's so that we get a more sense of the background, of the overview of where we are, so we can feel more situated in what's going on. And then especially, I think you should mention specifically, because you use the specifics of that one hotel that happens to be there in Yosemite. So you're sort of, if you're having a poem where it's all generalities and you're always at a distance and it could be anywhere, it could be multiple places, that's fine, but we're already specifically put in one place. So why tell us that one hotel without telling us the bigger view of it, you know? Jaymee Thomas says it have been better oriented if the title had included rock or mountain, or like rock climbing season or mountain climbing season. Yeah. Niels Zutch says, what's the ark doing here? The few that don't need to sleep again are the ones that made it to the summit? Yeah, I'm not sure. Debsy says they died. I don't think they died, but that almost wonders if they did. I'm just confused. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, both these poems are just, those things were great details, really nice images, but they sort of drift by and lack the overarching story that we can really connect to and sink our teeth into and enjoy. So work on that, just the background, getting the structure, the who and why, where, what's going on, so that we can really appreciate the significance of the details that you're really great at describing. And really nice rhythms with the voice, too. Yeah, H. Lapina said, it seems clear someone died from my take. That's why I took it more as an Everest-like destination. Yeah, I mean, some of us left early, like died early? Beaconed out by, is that what the beaconed out by ravens is? I don't know. I find it that hard to follow. Yeah. Tom Bartlett says, about at this point every week I begin to see the flaws in the poem I'm working on. Yeah, well, I mean, the truth is so much of what we do here is just trying to figure out the poems, and it, you know, how much effort, how much time and energy is spent doing that is the real, you know, a general problem with so many poems, and just having it be clear. It's harder to do than it seems, and it does more work than people give it credit for. Like, it's really important to understand where we are within a poem or any kind of piece of writing so we can connect to it. Okay, let's take a look. So thanks for sharing those. So really, again, Elizabeth Vines from Nevada City, great details. I just like more connective tissue. Okay, let's take a look at someone else's poems now. Oops, I didn't turn the music on. Yeah, we don't need that. Let's see. We also had, I don't think we've done Jaymee Thomas in a long time, if ever. Let's put Jaymee Thomas in here. And Jaymee sent some poems about a month ago. 2 poems here. Let's take a look. Oh, and does Jaymee have any general questions? Jaymee says, any and all feedback is welcome. Does this feel like a poem for poem number 1? Is the storytelling too overt to let the reader find themselves anywhere inside? And for poem number 2, does it go on too long? And if so, where does it begin to lag or lose your interest? Okay, let's take a look. Here we go. Try to get this all on one page. Okay. To make it even, Sue was the daughter. She'd shown me a bong when I was 9. She was cool in a way I didn't understand. I used every excuse to be around her. When we were neighbors, she tolerated it mostly. Once I let myself in. She was naked, my stomach pinched, my feet were cement in the doorway. I stared. She screamed. She lunged. The door smacked me in my face. My nose bled, but I didn't complain. It was fair penance for that kind of curiosity. I flashed back to this moment during a freak snowstorm, twice as far from home as Sue's bedroom. I thought about how far I'd come. Sue stepped out onto the porch with a hot chamomile that night I was stranded, handed me a place to sleep and dry clothes, a pink sweatsuit, obviously new, matching top and bottom. My family had moved on, but not up enough for pink sweatsuit money. I told her it'd do. I was the best version of my worst self in that suit. I left early the next morning, still wearing it. I was day-old cake with ganache climbing into my $200 car. I revved it up, welcomed the smell of cold exhaust, shouted promises of returns over the highway noise. She kept calling long after it was polite, asking for her sweatsuit back. I was embarrassed for her, that she lacked the pride to let it go. She was 30, I was 16. I thought it was just about clothes. She died 7 years ago, and I still see her every night when my conscience stages a walk past parade of faces I should have done better by. All I can do now is keep folding what I owe her into this poem, knowing it's way past too late to be enough. Yeah, Neil Such says, I love the cake and ganache line. And Elizabeth Fine says, pink sweatsuit money, yeah. And Christina Waven says, really compelling story telling right off the bat. Yeah, I agree. So this is, a very natural voice, says H. Lapinow. Yeah, and Kimberly Gibson Trent says, she was 30, I was 16. I thought it was just about clothes. Love this turn. Tom Barrow says, the unusually long lines layout I find distracting. Let me see. So To Make It Even is the title. And I felt this is, we get the story, we get a sense of what's going on, and so we get to connect to it. So comparing it to the last poem, we feel a lot more grounded in this one. H. Lapina says, good length, it seems just right. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look. Sue was the daughter. To make it even, sorry. Sue was the daughter. She'd shown me a bong when I was 9. She was cool in a way I didn't understand. I used every excuse to be around her. So the one thing I find confusing in this poem is how she ends up back. The porch, and I'm still a little confused. So Sue is the daughter, and then we're back in a snowstorm, and suddenly we're on the porch. I guess that night is what's confusing. I don't know. Maybe it'll be less confusing when we read the whole thing again, but I find it a little bit hard to follow that part of it. And then there's a little bit at the end that I think we're going to talk about too. But otherwise, it's a really, really nice poem. Tamarla says, why the hyphen M dash in the title? Yeah. To Hope says, Sue is the neighbor's daughter. Yeah, Sue is the neighbor's daughter. Okay, well, let's read it again, because I felt a little bit of this confusing. Sue was the daughter. She'd shown me a bong when I was 9. She was cool in a way I didn't understand. I used every excuse to be around her. I love the simplicity of that and the clarity of just the opening. We really get a sense of this relationship, which is easy to imagine and feels real. When we were neighbors, she tolerated it mostly. Once I let myself in, she was naked, my stomach pinched, my feet were cement in the doorway. I stared, she screamed, she lunged, the door smacked me in my face. My nose bled, but I didn't complain. It was fair penance for that kind of curiosity. So right up to here, I'm really following along. And then I flashed back to this moment during a freak snowstorm. Twice as far from home as Sue's bedroom. So I think there's just something about the way I think this is, first of all, the back to this moment. There's a way, first of all, you could say I flashed back to this moment during a freak snowstorm. It's like you could be thinking now about this other moment and you're flashing back to this moment where the snowstorm happened, or you could be flashing back to the moment where you walked in on her naked during the snowstorm. And there's a little bit of way that it's ambiguous there, even though it's probably the latter. But then that just clouds the whole thing. So twice as far from home is Sue's bedroom. So what was twice as far from home? The snowstorm was twice as far from home is Sue's bedroom, but Sue is a neighbor, so like it's like 2 houses down. Obviously that's not the case, but I don't really understand that either. Yeah. Yeah, and Molly House says, so anyway, so there's a freak snowstorm twice as far from home as Sue's bedroom. I thought about how far I'd come. Sue stepped out onto the porch with hot chamomile that night. I was stranded. But how did you get, because Sue, it was when we were neighbors, so now we're not neighbors, but you still knew where she lived and you were out somewhere and you knew that that family had moved somewhere you could get to easier than home. I think that's what it's saying. It's just a little hard to piece that together. So that needs to just be clarified so we don't get hung up on it. I think that's what's going on. Anyway, but continuing. And it was a snowstorm night. She stepped on the porch with hot chamomile that night. I was stranded. Handed me a place to sleep and dry clothes, a pink sweatsuit, obviously new, matching top and bottom. My family had moved on, but not up enough for pink. And so the moved on too. I was wondering, like, we moved physically because they're not neighbors anymore. But then it means moved on money wise. So her family moved to like a richer neighborhood. I don't think any of that really matters. So more, I would like cut some of this stuff out that's just not necessary for the real heart of the story. The pink sweatsuit money is a nice detail in that difference. How much in awe when you were younger the speaker was of Sue, and then now she's got money for pink sweatsuits too, and that's an important detail and works. But the rest of the stuff, I think we don't need to piece it together. We can just sort of skip it and tell it, even if it's not the truth about the snowstorm story. We can get through it a lot faster by skipping a lot of the details and smoothing it out where it just kind of makes sense, or explain it in a way that does. Anyway, where we go. So I told her I'd do it. I was the best version of my worst self in that suit. This is my favorite line in the poem, I think. I love the idea of I was the best version of my worst self in that suit. It's a great observation. I left early the next morning, still wearing it. It was a day-old cake with ganache climbing into my $200 car. I revved it up, welcomed the smell of cold exhaust, shouted promises of returns over the highway noise. She kept calling long after it was polite, asking for her sweatsuit back. I was embarrassed for her that she lacked the pride to let it go. And this is another thing that I didn't really understand. This feels sort of like the best version of my worst self, that kind of like insight, but I don't quite get lacking the pride to let it go. She was 30, I was 16. It just doesn't feel like the right reason for being embarrassed for her. She was 30, I was 16. I thought it was just about clothes. She died 7 years ago, and I still see her every night. I think I would too reestablish Sue by, instead of just using she all the time, because I think it's Sue the whole time, but we only use her name in the very first line, and it just helps us keep track of the she, so we don't have to think about it too. If you reintroduce her as Sue sometimes, maybe like Sue was 30, I was 16. I thought it was just about clothes. She died 7 years ago, and I still see her every night when my conscience stages a walk past parade of the faces I should have done better by. So this I like the concept of this, but it's the way it's phrased is very clunky and way too many syllables that it could be told much more smoothly than that. It's using passive voice in part, one of the reasons why. But I still see her every night as a parade walks past of faces I should have done better by. I mean, that's a quicker way to say it right there. All I can do now is keep folding what I owe her into this poem. I like that, knowing it's way past too late to be enough. Yeah, and I think that works too. So really, it's just a couple things to smooth out in this poem, but it's working well. Yeah, Tom Barlow says, love the turn and evolution of this poem. PMB says, I love the line about cake, but what's the significance of it? It's so specific, and I would expect stale beer or old dry weed. Ganache seems a bit highbrow. Well, it's because, wearing this pink sweatsuit felt like that. It felt highbrow, and it was colorful in the way a cake is. So that's why the metaphor. Yeah. But so a couple things to Smollett that don't quite make sense. But otherwise, I think this poem works really well. Okay. But yeah, so what was the question? Let me look at the question. Does this feel like a poem? Yeah, definitely. Is the storytelling too overt to let the reader find themselves anywhere inside? No, definitely not too overt. So both questions asked, I think, are answered in the positive. It's good. Good storytelling, especially that opening, and we get the story and we just appreciate it so much more by having a sense of what's going on and not feeling lost, and just keep it as clear as it is in the first few lines, and then it's a great poem. There's a very much like a Ted Kooser or something kind of poem in this, and if you look at his poems, there's what's the one in Rattle? Not the most recent one. Is it like a trailer park? It's a similar sort of framed memory. Roadside? Yeah, I think Roadside. Let's read Roadside, and just to see how smooth, how the storytelling sort of holds the whole thing up. We know where we are the whole time, and that's what makes the poem feel resonant for us. Okay, so Roadside. Someone has picked up after it, but it was there, a half mile north of the interstate highway where the paved spur ends and the gravel takes over, a patch of high-waist weeds where what was once a trailer park has since gone back to pasture. So we know, the first stanza, we have that what we were asking for in the first couple poems, like a sweeping view of where we are. We know we're roadside, and then we get to see someone has picked up after it, but it was there, a half mile north of the interstate highway where the paved spur ends and gravel takes over, a patch of waist-high weeds where what was once a trailer park has since gone back to pasture. So we have the weeds and the grass, the lay of the land there, the waist-high patch. It was never much more than a start, and it never got anywhere close to a finish, just a half dozen second and third hand cheap aluminum trailers with windows glaring on their kitchen ends and doors pulled shut on any hope of welcome. So we the first stanza, we get a sense that the sweeping sense of I'm looking there now on the roadside, looking at this field. Then I remember what it was like years ago. And so we just get the one scene painted, then the scene in the past painted. They sat yards apart like dice rolled out and left where they'd stopped, and a few ambitious saplings had pushed up under the hood and worked their way in and were leafing out over the roofs and the lanes which once led in and under and were gone. So it's some more description of what's going on. And then this one it's the last stanza of the poem, and we get to the significance of it all. I suppose the trailers went for scrap, but if you and I were to step over that wire with its dirty white rag of surrender knotted dead sinner, we might just find some part of something left behind by something left behind, enough to show you what was there. And so, very simple poem like Ted's always are. And I don't think this is actually the one I was thinking of. But it paints a scene, it moves through time, and shows it all very clearly, so we get to add the story to it. Okay. Let's take a look at the other poem from Jaymee. And that is this. We're probably getting back together soon. Here we go. We're probably getting back together soon. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. There we go. Hang on. There we go. That's better. We're probably getting back together soon. My phone died this week. I'd like to say I've enjoyed the silence, just low-fly music, sip-lipping into flow states. Sorry, let me read that again. We're probably getting back together soon. My phone died this week. I'd like to say I've enjoyed the silence, just lo-fi music slipping into flow states, but I'd be lying. Only a handful of friends to tell, enough to register the gravity of my fake emergency, forced off-grid like it's 1503, where I imagined I'd be decent at throwing logs on a fire, but useless at hunting. No survival instinct. I get sentimental when it gets quiet. This is how I find out what Black Mirror really meant. Slick glass, dark dead reflecting back a smeared rectangle of myself, slack-jawed staring, only one of us alive, allegedly. Please know this. It was so much more than my cash. Its shape, my memory. My hand aches for its frictionless drag. But I had to get a replacement. I picked the same model, not loyalty, just the hope I'd backfill the imprint of its ancestor. I'm not too proud to admit I miss its constancy, the companionship of fugue state afternoons given over to scrolling. But I've been more alone than I expected, realizing how much of me was never here to begin with. It's a disorienting false north, this gatherlessness. I'm still sitting with it. But get this, evidently I cry now, despite half a life spent convincing myself I'd therapized it out. Nighttime is hardest between my husband and me. Without the device, the hours feel longer. He's older, closer to death than I am. He hates it when I say that. I won't tell him. Until now, I'm not sure either of us really know how much silence we'd produced under all these years together. I wonder if we'll go back to old habits when the new phone arrives. I think we already know the answer. The screenless space hasn't been clarifying, just absence. With no metaphor or cushion, at the risk of repeating myself, I do know this. I miss her. Distraction. So for this one, I think it's very different than the other one. Deb T says, this gives me journaling vibes. I feel like this one hasn't found its sort of poem yet. I really like the beginning, and I think maybe at some point it went off tracks and sort of didn't go the direction of like the emotional energy. And so the energy kind of fizzled out. And I think that's what Deb T means when she says, this gives me journaling vibes. Because I was really, for the first third or so, I was really on board and paying attention. And, felt hooked in. And then, Tom Barlow says, how common is understanding the reference to Black Mirror? That is a good question. That's a show that I watched. It kind of ran out of, it got a little bit of a cliche in itself. I stopped, but I watched the first couple seasons, so that's a very easy reference for me. I'm not sure how common it is. Well, let's read it again and really pay attention to where it's sort of, a lot of times you just sort of take a turn in a poem. You go down a path and it ends up not being the path that like was going to lead to something. So let's see where it goes. Cause I think it's not really a matter of, editing like it was. The last poem was just a finished poem, except it had some things to smooth over. This one, I think it starts out and then it needs to find a new direction. Okay, we're probably getting back together soon. My phone died this week. I'd like to say I've enjoyed the silence, just lo-fi music slipping into flow states, but I'd be lying. So the honesty, the straightforwardness is really working at the beginning. We know exactly what's happening, which is nice, and I'm engaged to the poem at that point. Only a handful of friends to tell, enough to register the gravity of my fake emergency. I like that, like the self-effacing humor of that, calling it a fake emergency, and forced off-grid like it's 1503, where I imagine I'd be decent at throwing logs in a fire, but useless at hunting. So those are good details, and it feels really honest and authentic. No survival instinct. I get sentimental when it gets quiet. I think that works too. This is how I find out what Black Mirror really meant. And maybe some people don't recognize that reference, and I can understand that for sure. So maybe referencing this to the television show so people have a direction of where to go. This is how I find out what Black Mirror really meant. Slick glass, dark dead reflecting back a smeared rectangle of myself, slack-jawed, staring, only one of us alive, allegedly. I think we can cut that stanza. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, the triggering idea of missing one's phone and finding a lot of oneself in its use is interesting, but it sticks too long with missing the phone. We could enter the imagined world in the phone. That's interesting. So maybe, what if we use this Black Mirror, but I think maybe don't reference Black Mirror, but we could describe life as seen in the reflection of the blank phone screen. Please know this, it was much more than my cash. Its shape, my memory. I know the use of cash there throws me off. I don't know if that's just me, but it feels a little. It's not. It feels like an inaccurate use that makes me confused about why it's being used for a moment. I think I stumbled over it the first time I read it too because of that. Its shape, my memory. My hand aches for a frictionless drag. And then we go, but I had to get a replacement. I picked the same model. No loyalty, just the hope I'd backfill the imprint of its ancestor. I'm not too proud to admit I miss its constancy, the companionship of fugue state afternoons given over to scrolling. But I've been more alone than I expected, realizing how much of me was never here to begin with. It's a disorienting false north, this gatherlessness. Yes, so I think what it is we sort of start talking like in a philosophical way, and nothing really happens after this point. Once we get to the mirror, in the please know this, I think the please know this is probably the wrong turn. I think that this went from like a storytelling kind of voice. We're in the past tense. My phone died this week. I'd like to say I've enjoyed the silence, and we describe the silence. And we're telling the story of missing the phone, or the phone dying, but then the please know this changes sort of like the speaker's positioning, and then it starts to feel sort of rambly and not like it doesn't know where it's going, and stops telling a story. And so I think really keep telling the story. Like instead of going to direct address to the reader, like what happened next? Like literally, like you're looking at it, you realize what Black Mirror meant, you see yourself, maybe describe yourself a little bit, and then like what did you like physically do next? So after that, and tell it like a story, because that's where the poem is the most gripping. But I had to get a replacement. I picked the same model, so we move forward in time, but we're talking about it in a generality. Anyway, we go. So it's discerning false north as gatherlessness. I'm still sitting with it, but get this. Evidently, I cry now, despite half a life spent convincing myself I'd therapized out. Another thing I don't understand is this. Evidently, I cry now. I didn't know where to place that emotionally and the significance of that, so it didn't really make sense. So I think maybe storytelling to the point of crying, so then we get a sense of the trajectory of that and the significance of that, and then we can continue. I think maybe that's the key to this. Nighttime is hardest between my husband and me. Without the device, the hours feel longer. He's older, closer to this. You see all this stuff, instead of describing like we're in the scene, like we're experiencing it directly through you, we're getting like a summary of like the next week and how you felt about the next week. And so we're not feeling like we're implanted in this experience. We're being told about it like after the fact. And that's why it feels like it loses its energy. Nighttime is hardest between my husband and me. Without the device, the hours feel longer. He's older, closer to death than I am. He hates it when I say that. I won't tell him until now. Until now, I'm not sure either of us really know how much silence we'd produced under all these years together. I think that's a great concept. So I think that the poem does have a sense of turn, a sense of like, this is, someone mentioned triggering, like that triggering town idea of there's one initial story and then there's something really deeper we want to talk about. This poem has that. And it's this line right here is the heart of it. How much silence we'd produced under all these years together. Like silence as a product is a really fascinating thing. And having that be shown starkly through the loss of the phone makes a lot of sense. It just lost its sense of storytelling. So we're not inside. We're not experiencing it directly. We're experiencing it like secondhand, and so it doesn't have the power and energy it did at the very beginning. So tell the story straight through. Keep us in the scene with the speaker here, the whole time. Like, let us see what's happening. Let us see in the moment of these realizations, and then we'll feel them too instead of just having to be told about them. I wonder if we'll go back to old habits when the new phone arrives. I think we already know the answer. The screenless space hasn't been clarifying, just absence with no metaphor or cushion. And this pushes the idea, that we're talking about the real heart of the poem even further. So on that level, it's really good. It's not engaging in a direct way. At the risk of repeating myself, I do know this: I miss her. Distraction. Yeah, and that feels very summary. So we just got away from storytelling and went into summary, and that's why the poem felt like it lost energy. Yeah. Okay. Elizabeth Brown says, I think of mixing up the order of the poem a bit. H. Lapinow says, you could probably drop the self-reflection philosophy in the middle and come back in with nighttime after the first couple stanzas, stay in the narrative. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what it did. And the poem will come to life once you do that. It just took a wrong turn by going, and it was really, and I think what it is, to be a little more even direct about it, where was that spot? So we have the please know this, and it's a direct address to the reader, but there's no real sense throughout the poem that you're addressing the reader. Like, you're sort of just storytelling in a more general, like whispering in my ear way, not in an interactive, engaging kind of way. And so this just led the voice in a wrong direction, where it was more sort of like abstractly summarizing instead of staying in the moment. So that's it. I think once you do that, the poem will take off, because there's a real heart underneath the poem that really works. Okay, well, we got to wrap it up. That's going to be the day we're past the hour. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on the Critique of the Week. Today I've got an appointment in a little bit, so I got to speed along. But thanks for doing this. It's always a lot of fun. We'll get to other poets next week, of course. Now, like I said at the very top, we just released Katie's The Poetry Space. I co-host that with her. It's the podcast she produces. And we talked with Brian O'Sullivan, with Chelsea McClellan, with Christiana Doucette, and with Susan Spear about meter and the importance of meter in poetry. It's a really great two-part episode. We talked for like 2.5 hours. We could have gone for much longer. It's a really important topic. It should be taught, meter and form, in schools, MFA programs. It's really taught poorly or not at all. And we try to address that. Susan has a textbook out, and it's a really great episode to listen to. I highly recommend it. Now, also coming up on the Rattlecast, I have to let everybody know or remind you, the guest this week is going to be Luigi Coppola. His book, Even Gods Get Distracted Sometimes, or God Gets Distracted Sometimes. And that's going to be, he's a British poet, or Italian poet, I think, living in the UK. But given the time zones, we're going to do an earlier show than normal, so it's another strange time. Still Monday, but 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. He's going to have a whole bunch of interesting stuff. Interactive poems, video poems. He's going to do, he's a really multimedia, interesting person, Luigi. And we're going to get to explore and learn more about him and his new book, Even God Gets Distracted Sometimes, which includes illustrations by Mark Shuttleworth. So that's going to be the guest this week. The prompt on the Rattlecast is going to be... let me pull it up. It was about... Well, I think it's right now. Consider your most controversial opinions and boldly write a poem about at least one without apologizing for the stance. Include a fresh metaphor. So be controversial. We'll see how controversial we can get everybody to be on the Rattlecast number 342. Early time, Monday, May 11th, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime. We'll talk to you later. Bye.